Hello, this is Eric. I haven't been online in a couple of weeks, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One is I've been really busy with a family matter and helping my mother get into an adult family home. Also, in my faith tradition, which is Orthodox Christianity, we had the beginning of Great Lent, which involves a church service every night. So I wasn't able to do that. But I wanted, and I was going to run home because it's been a big day, but I thought, I think I just wanted to say a few things that might be of encouragement to anybody who is interested. Um, One is it's good to think in terms of a cybernetic relationship or a systemic relationship. It's too easy to think that A always causes B, and simple is good. And that's why I do believe that systems, I think, are simple, but they look complex. But there's a simplicity into it that um, if we look at life as mysterious and there's only so much we know, it works better. I think the bold man who knows what he knows, and I just know that this was the cause of this. There's dangers to that, where if we take a humble approach, saying, we don't know exactly what caused this or how to approach things. So let's get, I'm talking so fluffy talk here, but if we get into some specifics, I think it helps. One of the things that comes up in relationships is that we often just see things from our point of view. And we don't think about other people's stories of, like judgmentalism is only seeing things through my point of view. And it's not humble for sure. A more wise approach would be to say, I only know only a little, that there's another side to the story. There's reasons why people do what they do. And it's not, I'm not seeing everything there is to see. Like, for instance, if we jump down the mind body syndrome thing, there are people that get a horrible stomach ache and they just assume it's from the food allergy they had or something physical, like they have irritable bowel syndrome. Okay. It could be also, though, a discussion that they had earlier and that it really bothered them and it made their stomach in knots. They think about it only in terms of physical challenges, and that would be linear thinking, just one mode of thinking. And if we do that over and over, then we really almost train ourselves to have that problem over and over, that we go, well, it was from that I ate, or it was from that I ate. And then when we eat that thing, that type of food, then we start to actually get sick because that's how we're programmed to see it. All the while, it started off with a maybe I was angry or sad over something. For instance, let's say that I'm at a restaurant, I'm having spaghetti, and I get the news that some horrible event has happened and someone has passed away. The way I'm designed is I'm going to have a horrible situation with grief. It's going to be difficult. I may or may not associate spaghetti with that or not. And that's another mystery why some people would go, I never want to eat spaghetti again, or it makes them sick to the stomach. Or that others just go, it's not the spaghetti. I near, about a few months ago, I was at a hospital seeing someone who was passing away. It was quite sad. Um, and the wife was vomiting a lot. And what's interesting is my first thought is I didn't expect someone to be sick to their stomach with grief, but that's how this particular person grieved. Again, another question is why do some people go down that path and others not? So, a cybernetic relationship, instead of A causes B, it's more like they influence each other. A and B are somehow connected. So, say, like, I'm very conscientious with money and spending money, and say, like, I even get kind of tight fisted and frugal. And so, say, like, a loved one in my family becomes more and more open handed and gives away money and buys things indiscriminately. This is somewhat made up, by the way. And what's causing me to be so frugal? Is it that person's overspending? Or is my excessive frugality causing the person to spend so much because it feels like we're so controlling, it makes them want to spend more? Well, the answer is like yes. The two influence each other. If parents are over controlling with their children, it may cause, and I don't like the word cause, let's say influence the children to be, or some of the children to be more rebellious and do things that are inappropriate. And then when they start to do more things that are inappropriate, it triggers the parents to be more controlling. So you end up with this relationship that has a circular aspect to it. And then it gets worse. It becomes like snowball. In addiction, in the world of addiction, it's very much like a person who sticks their hand in a fire. They're feeling the pain. Well, they're not really feeling the pain because they're kind of numb. And a loved one says, "Oh my gosh, Eric, get that finger out. I mean, get the hands out of the fire. It's killing you. I mean, it's killing me. It's killing us both." They are feeling my feelings for me so that I'm not feeling them. If I don't feel the pain of what I'm doing to myself, it actually makes me not feel motivated to change anything. So the more they try to control me and say, "Come on, get it out. It's killing us both," the more I kind of go, don't tell me what to do. Um, I'm fine. And the more in denial I go, and the more in denial I go, the worse it gets, and the worse it gets, the worse they feel the experience, and then it gets really out of hand, no pun intended. So you can see how it feeds on itself. Now, what's interesting is they may have a level of denial and not see it as clearly as a child or someone farther and goes, "Why are you with him? This is killing you both." Um, in fact, I just got kind of a neck pain. So this is funny, but I'm going to get up and get some water here. I'm learning to take care of myself. If I'm going to be distracted with a neck pain that's just all of a sudden happened, I thought maybe I need some hydration there. So you can see that it's a system. So there are family systems. So let's get a little bit more complex. You may have parents that are alcoholics, or one's alcoholic, and then the other one's more codependent. The firstborn traditionally could be compulsively good, a hero, never does anything wrong, represses their feelings. In so doing, they often can have physical health issues. Um, they may have their own addictions, but they wouldn't acknowledge them so easily because they're the good one. And the family does rely on that good hero to be the hero. Whether they're a pastor, they've gotten their second doctorate, whether they hardworking doctor, lawyer, etc. The second born realizes unconsciously that they can't compete with this, so they don't. They often go the other direction, which is much more negative attention. They're called the scapegoat. They represent to the family a distraction that, mom and dad's issues can be now deflected because so and so has a problem. The strange thing about this, and having experienced some of this professionally and personally, is that everybody plays along. I mean, the scapegoat gets some benefit by being the scapegoat, but they really don't like to be a scapegoat. The firstborn, the hero, gets some benefit from it, but it's not the most functional relationship. In fact, the word dysfunction comes from all this. It functions, but just not really well. The thirdborns usually are not trying to get attention. Oh, back to the scapegoat. So the scapegoat will have problems with the law, addictions, anger, risk taker, and they get negative attention. Attention's really important. People don't like to be ignored. The thirdborn or the middle children often are what they call the lost children. They represent to the family, no one has to worry about these people or these kids. They kind of take care of themselves. And the first and second born has stolen a lot of the attention. So often they bond with animals. They feel closer to animals than people. Yeah, and sometimes they struggle with learning because he just didn't get a lot of attention. The last born is usually anything that distracts from the family through humor and being cute. They often feel kind of immature because the family system sets them up for it's unconscious. No one's trying to do this. That's why it's not just a linear one person's causing something that begins to have a mind of itself. But the last born is used to having all these people tell them what to do. And because of that, then they don't really have to practice the skill of taking charge or thinking for themselves or deciding things or being responsible. They just wait for someone else to do that. So you can see how the systemic relationship really works. So for people to have change in their life, often they have to, we go to a therapist, and if the therapist is only seeing things through the eyes of you're an individual and I'm just going to help you change, okay, that could be useful, but I could go back to the family system and then get stuck all over again. So changing the system often changes the players. And sometimes a therapist just stirs the pot up a bit, that they do something to get the family to realign itself at a higher level of functioning, so that they start to adjust. Systems don't tend to like to change. They tend to want to keep the same because it provides security and predictability. Yes, things are bad, but it's predictable. We kind of know how bad things are. If people were to get sober, or if people were to move, or someone who's always bad starts to become good, it all falls apart. Because they're just uncomfortable with that anxiety of change. I worked in a situation like 30 years ago, and I'll protect the the names, obviously, and I don't remember the names, but it was a mother who brought in the son and he was misbehaving. And clearly he was the scapegoat. How do I know? Well, because her brother had ended up in prison and she kept saying, well, I hope he doesn't turn out like my brother. And I felt like, yeah, it's probably better if you don't say it like that. He had an older sister, and this woman was older than her brother, I'm guessing. So you can see the family system being portrayed out again. One day they came in, and the daughter wasn't even my client, but the mother showed the grades, how good the grades were of the daughter. And I asked what the grades are with the son who I was working with, and they were just as good, A's, and but it just doesn't register because that's not what we're used to. Okay. So, how does this help us with change? Well, if you understand that any changes in your life is going to create a disruption in the system. For instance, we recently celebrated the beginning of Lent. In our faith tradition, we give up some food. It's called fasting, and I won't go into the details, but your body begins to adjust to a difference. And if you go at it with, oh no, I have to do this, it won't be fun, etc., then it probably won't. If you go at this with the idea that this is good for me, then it'll be good. And it's a change either way because your body's not getting the food that it usually eats. But it's your attitude is another aspect of the system that helps influence this. Okay, so our brains has chemicals. Our level of sleep affects things. Our level of behaviors. If I'm laughing more, I step outside and get some cold wind on my face, or I am thinking negative thoughts or happy thoughts. Or a person walks in the door and says, guess what? You have extra money, or something like that. All those are different factors or variables that can influence my mood. So I'm always a little bit concerned when someone simplistically says this causes this and that's why that happened. And it's like, I'm not sure. I mean, yes, maybe, and maybe it was 90% influence, but maybe there's other influences. And hopefully you'll take some of this, not that you're watching everything about the virus or the pandemic. Well, I'm using such funny words. Haven't used the word coronavirus in a while. Decided to just let it be and not always be thinking about that most of the time. It didn't make me feel happy. I've decided not to watch the news. I'll learn what I need to learn some other way. Now, this is fascinating. My whole physiology feels different because I just don't do that to myself anymore. Before, I felt like, well, it's important for me to know, to be in the know. I don't know now. I changed my mind. So change is stressful. If I see that the change is good and it's going to turn out good, then it turns out good. If I see it as bad and terrifying, then I can make myself sick. I'm thinking of a conversation I had with my chiropractor once. I was getting surgery, and he's a good guy. It's funny. He's a really good guy, but it was just funny. He says, oh, well, you know, your body doesn't know the difference between getting a surgery and getting stabbed in the gut. I was quick-witted. It's funny. I'm not always quick-witted, but I quickly said, and so when you move me quickly against the wall, in other words, slam me against the wall, my body doesn't know that you're giving me a chiropractic adjustment versus just slamming me up against the wall. I said, no, I believe that when people choose to get some kind of pain and suffering in their life for good, it turns out good. If I see pain and suffering as just bad in and of itself, that there's no good in it, then it makes it pretty miserable. Yeah, no, I really believe the body does know the difference, especially if I'm telling it. And I see this with children. If they are told, oh my gosh, the shot's scary, it hurts really, 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 really bad. It's going to hurt really, really bad. If parents, and no one says that, maybe a sibling says that and scares them to death, and it makes it 10 times worse. Because we know that pain is related to how we perceive it in our brains. But if we're told that no, this shot is going to help us, get better, we'll start to feel better already. This happens with pills a lot. You just give someone a procedure. You can give someone water and tell them it's chemotherapy, and their hair will fall out. Yeah, no, it's something. How we are influenced by our thoughts. And so, say like I'm around people that are negative, critical, fault finding. I could try to be, and I'm making myself the hero here, please forgive me, but I could try to be a force for good and try to change the subject and think positively. I could pray, I could try to do all that. I'm just one influence, and it might work, it might not, but I need to know that that system, I could be sucked into that system without knowing it and start to become critical myself. Now, systems are funny. There's something called the conscience in the family. One person may be unconsciously elected to always act as the conscience for the rest of the members, and the members are doing their thing. And the other one's kind of critiquing, like, well, why are you doing that? Is that the best thing to do? Kind of like a Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder. Without knowing it, that conscience could be unconsciously encouraging people not to think critically or to have a conscience. That they're becoming so overly conscientious as the conscience of the family, it makes other people not have to think. It's like packing for a trip. Some people rely on the person who's going to pack the Band-Aids and the chains if we're going over snow, or think in terms of all the things that might be needed to make the experience a little bit better in case we need them. The other people just willy-nilly just show up and everything just happens to be there magically. Is it the willy-nilly person that's causing the person to be so overly conscientious, or is it their conscientiousness that caused the person to be so relaxed? So a lot of times with systems, you want to be balanced. If the overly conscientious person learns to let go and relax, hopefully the willy-nilly person will start to get a grip and start to think, I better take care of things. Same thing with spending. If one's overly conscientious about spending and this person's spending all this money, you start to go, well, the more you try to control this person, the more they sneak out and spend. So when one lets go, in 12 steps theology, lets go and lets God and trust the process, often they start to get the balance. Same thing happens with parenting. If one gets overly conscientious about the safety of the kids, the other parent is letting them play with fire and sticks. And then the parents start to go at it each other, saying, why are you letting them play with fire and sticks? And it's like, you're so controlling, you don't let them have any fun. So then they just start to polarize, this happens in churches. This has happened with the coronavirus, the mask-wearing people, the non-mask-wearing people. Each party could see that the other's wrong and in their own eyes and be critical and all that. Or they could choose to see what's good about what each person is doing. The more mature a person's able to think, the more they're able to understand the complex facets of why people do what they do. For instance, wearing a mask, and I'm not even trying to promote mask wearing or not mask wearing, but it's a really good exercise of the complexity of things. For instance, say like someone wears a mask, other people think, oh no, it's because they're afraid of catching the virus. Maybe. The person could say, well, it's the germs are going around it anyway, and they don't work based on what they've read. But maybe there's a whole bunch of other research that says it actually reduces the chances of catching the virus. But maybe they're not doing that at all. It has nothing to do with catching the virus. It's the idea of not wanting to spread the virus. And so in their heart, they're trying to follow the authorities, both Christian and secular, to try, if they're Christian, say like it's a church setting, they're trying to do their best to do their part to reduce the risk of spread. And they could get really mad, like, why isn't everybody else wearing masks? Or they could just understand that it's just a small part they do. And the people that think only one way, and too simplistic, go, you think the mask is going to stop the virus from spreading? Well, there's probably multifaceted ways that the virus is spreading, as well as how we could mitigate the spread of it. Like research has indicated that 80% of the people that really got sick from it were obese. So based on that, would it be better to shut down McDonald's and fast food restaurants to help save people from future pandemics? People say, well, you're taking away their right of choice. Well, this is a taking away of right of choice too, which is a bigger influence. And see, that's why higher level thinkers, and I'm not saying thinking is the answer, I really actually believe prayer is the answer, but to be able to think in various aspects. Let's go back to the mask thing. Maybe a person's wearing it not because they're afraid of transmitting it, not because they're afraid of catching it, but to make someone else happy. Maybe they wore a mask to help the mask wearing people feel comfortable. That it has nothing to do with, I had a dear friend come to the office who particularly doesn't necessarily believe in mask wearing, but they showed up with a mask, which I thought was so kind and loving, because I work in a, kind of a mental health setting where we got to go along with that. Or if you want to work, you don't have to go along with it. Some people are wearing the mask so that they can go visit relatives, because the relatives are saying things like, I can't visit you unless you're doing social distancing and reducing the virus. And so and out of love, they do that because they'd like to see their family members. And again, we could judge the family members that are so strict that they won't leave their house. Why do that? So if anything, this last year has taught me that things are more complex than it seems. And I'm actually amazed that with leadership, there wasn't more higher thinking on this. Like a good example of this is shutting down everything. And I'm not meaning to be critiquing, and this came up lots, but shutting down something to prevent one thing over here can cause death over there and hardships. And that was just so single-sided. And I think that politicians or leaders, even in church, should be more, and I want to be careful, but have teaching or some kind of teaching so that they can see things from multi points of view. It seems like that's more useful than I just see it from how I see it. Yeah, it's a very interesting world. So it sounds like I'm critical of only one way to see things or non-complex system thinking people. But here's the deal, is that when we're frightened, we're still complex. We may find unconscious ways to get away from a deadly rattlesnake. But the reality is that we do seem to very much go all or nothing. We go black and white. There's no middle ground on getting away from the rattlesnake. We're fighting it or we're fleeing it. And so deprive people of sleep through worry, give them lots of videos from media people that only see it one way and then give you that way, that opinion. Humility would say things like, we don't know. We don't know exactly how to protect ourselves. People might be panic and go crazy. I think their thinking is that if we said that for our first sentence, people would run out to the streets. But I think people are smarter than that. But I think it would be a good premise, or not premise, a good foundational piece saying, I'm not sure exactly what to do. I would say it like that. But, you know, when people boldly said, it's no problem to go on a cruise, but then they turned around and said, no, you got to wear a mask. And then they said, no, you don't really need a mask. And then they kept changing their tune. That's not thinking clearly and at a high enough level to know what the ramifications are. Humility suggests we don't know everything. This is what I do for a living, and I've been through many other pandemics. But what we're going to do is we know that there is some level of protection if we wear a mask. We know there's some level of protection from exercise, eating right. We know that there's a level of protection of even staying indoors during certain times or using certain medicines for certain people. See, that flexibility of thinking, but no cocksuredness, will help produce people would trust the person because they're speaking clearly. Yeah, it's a very fascinating process to me. Yeah, I think we'd avoid a lot more arguments with people if we see that everybody has a reason why they do what they do. And probably try to move towards listening rather than trying to argue a point. I think higher thinking could be taught. I think through prayer, I think it's helpful. Through engaging with other people's opinions on things. Not that that's everything. In this last year, I've had lots of new things that have happened in my life that has made things actually better. Linear one-way thinking would say, Eric, was the pandemic a bad thing, like the shutdown? This was I heard a lot of this, was 2020 a bad year? I know what people are saying when they say that. Of course, I'm not going to say it was the best year of my life. But was there good things that came out of it? Probably. And 10 years from now, will it be as bad as it felt like at the time? Probably not. Will we be stronger for it? Maybe. We can learn a lot. And maybe God in his wisdom has allowed us to suffer a baby situation so that later we'd be a small test, so that later we'd be prepared for a bigger test. So think outside the box, actually. Think and pray to be able to see things from multifaceted points of view. Oh, like for instance, I work a lot with addiction. People come in and say, I'm drinking because my family members did this, or I lost my baby, or that. Yeah, that's one way to see it, but it could be that I already had problems with this way before, or that there's other influences like genetics or learned behavior. Things are more complex sometimes than they seem. So, with that in mind, let's be tender hearted and forgiving one another, and um, realize we only know only a little that comes from the AA book. And when we do that, we're going to be at a better place to receive God's grace and to be able to have greater understanding. I do believe that simplicity is where it's at too. So this message is, even though it looks complex, I think it's also trying to aim towards this idea. Maybe the simple message is, let's be humble, and we just don't know everything we think we know. So with that, I will let you go. You have a great evening.